And we welcome you in to episode 29 of the best podcast available. We continue to chug along into June, counting down the days to the start of the 2020 NFL season and the Browns season. And Gribble, there were rumors out there about us maybe going somewhere for some joint practices. The last few years, we've hung out in fabulous places, Tampa, Indianapolis. This year, we will be home. So will the other 31 teams in the National Football League. No joint practices. Everybody's staying at their facilities. And for some teams, it's almost unfathomable because, frankly, they've never had training camp at their facility, namely the Steelers, the Cowboys. I mean, there's some big changes here.
Yeah, and it's interesting because for the Browns, it's a small development because it sounds like joint practices were in the works at some point in the schedule. You imagine with the relationships that Kevin Stefanski has in the NFC North that you probably were going to make something work with one of those teams. So that's a small minor inconvenience. But I would say, just like last year, the team that we went and saw last year, the Colts, they've got to change all their plans. I mean, that even though that place isn't far removed from Indianapolis, they can't go there because that requires staying in dorms and things like that. So this is an understandable move. And I think a lot of us probably expected the joint practice announcement just because you want to eliminate anything like this that's not completely necessary. I don't know if all of us fully thought through that the possibility of stopping these teams from practicing where they normally practice was in the cards. And I do think, at least you mentioned the Cowboys, they practice, isn't it, every other year back in Dallas? So this isn't that big of an adjustment, but they were supposed to go to California this year. So, but I do wonder the teams like the Colts, the Steelers, that's going to be a major adjustment because this has been part of what they do for years.
Yeah, and I look at it, is it the Saints that go to the Greenbrier that leave New Orleans?
I believe their deal was up, though. I think they're already going back. There was a team, I forget who it was, there was a team that was leaning toward being the next team at that Greenbrier Resort.
Yeah, I mean, I look at teams in Texas and teams in California and, you know, the Cardinals, pretty crazy and how they're going to have to adjust on the fly. And I think all Pittsburgh fans and Pittsburgh Steelers brass have ever known is Latrobe, PA for training camp. So some big changes coming for some of these football teams. For us, you're right. We're lucky enough that we have the facilities, but even a team like the Bengals who doesn't have an outdoor or an indoor facility. I mean,
right.
What happens with bad weather?
They've been dealing with that for the last couple of years, haven't they?
They've been able to go, I think, to the University of Cincinnati.
Oh, okay.
They have a complex, but you can't go there. I mean, that's technically breaking the rule, I think. Jeez. So, I mean, if you get a rainy late summer, you know, we've had those before where we've had some major weather issues. I mean, things could really change a lot for some of these teams as they prepare for 2020. As we take a look at our own football team, we had a couple of guys address the media this week. Joel Bitonio, our Pro Bowl guard, always good to hear from him, and always some really poignant comments. And you learn a little bit when Joel talks. He's become the elder statesman of this football team. Your takeaways from Joel Bitonio's meeting with the media earlier this week?
I think he was a good person to hear from in light of kind of the recent events, and he did. He gave some good insight. A couple nuggets, and mostly about one, Kevin Stefanski really stressing how proactive these players should be and kind of turning words into actions with the latest kind of the movement in racial equality. And I think that's something clearly that Stefanski believes in. I think he wants to empower his players to use their platform for the best. And I think secondly, you know, we've seen Jarvis Landry be pretty outspoken on social media, and that clearly carried into the Zoom meeting room that the guys had early Monday. From what Joel said, a very emotional speech and really affected some guys. And, you know, Jarvis is now in his third year with the team. He's an older player in the league. He's comfortable in his position, I think, as an outspoken leader on this team. And I think he'll be maybe one of the figureheads for this team moving forward and kind of just being outspoken against these injustices. And I think it's a good place for the Browns to be. moving forward. And I think it was good to hear from Joel, just kind of the inner workings of what's going on in these meetings, because I think it's at this time of year, it's more than just about football.
Yeah, I think the other big takeaway from Joel, he really likes some of our new offensive linemen. Again, that room seems to be gelling at a really impressive rate for not being able to be together and on the field working together. The chemistry that's coming along with all of them, including our draft pick, Jedrick Wills, everything seems to be clicking on all cylinders with that offensive line room.
Yeah, and it's just one of those things where you can't wait to get him on the field. I mean, that's going to be the big thing. We keep hearing about all the chemistry that comes in these meeting rooms, and I think it's great. But I just want to see what Jedrick Wills looks like playing left tackle, and I think that's the thing that we're probably just not going to see until training camp. And I think that's the way these things seem to be trending. I mean, there's still hope that you can get in a mini camp here, but you might be running out of time when it comes to making a decision on that. So. I just want to see these guys play football, and I think it's just going to be, again, the mental aspect of this with installing a new playbook. The Browns are at a disadvantage, but when it comes to the actual physical act of playing football, everyone's going to be on the same page. So hopefully, once they get on the field, there shouldn't be too much of some hurdles to overcome. It's probably just going to be a less physical training camp. I think we have to get ready to buckle in for that, because I think that the adjustment period won't be there. So the offensive line just needs to make the most out of every single rep it gets, and that's going to be even more so. We've gone through so many of these training camps where injuries affect these guys and keep them on the field. That keeping these guys on the field is going to be so huge for this upcoming season.
And I would say I would follow that up with every day that goes by and every week that goes by, it definitely looks more and more. And you're starting to hear some of the national media pundits and their sources telling them the next time we see these guys in the building probably won't be until training camp.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL has had time on its side from the very beginning of this, and it still does. But at some point, you're going to have to reach the end of this part of the program, give them a little bit of a break, and then go into training camp. I think that part is unavoidable. You're not going to be able to stretch this out and only give maybe a week or two break between the training camp and the off-season program. That's probably not fair to the players. So I think that's where these next couple weeks, I think, are going to be probably pivotal in knowing if there is going to be any chance of these players getting together before training camp.
Yeah, no question. The other gentleman from our football team that talked this week, the offensive coordinator of your Cleveland Browns, Alex Van Pelt, met with the media on Wednesday. Gribbs, obviously everybody wants to know about Baker Mayfield's footwork, but I don't really know how you deal with that when you're not seeing the guy in person. But a lot of questions about Baker's footwork, but a lot of things coming out of the offensive room and Alex Van Pelt.
Yeah, he seemed pretty optimistic, and I think the big thing is this takeaway about Baker and kind of the adamancy of the way he has inserted himself in meetings. Says he's going to other position group meetings, just even though he doesn't have to be in there. And I think that's what you want to see out of your third-year quarterback, and I think that part has really impressed Alex Van Pelt. And I think he wouldn't have given Baker this change to his footwork if he didn't think he could handle it. And I think that's clearly something that Baker's been receptive to. And it's just going to be a matter of drilling it in. And again, I think Baker has the advantage of playing a position where he can still do a lot of practicing. And I think that he can practice this footwork. He can do a lot of throwing. He can do stuff with guys in Austin. Guys like Jedrick Wills can only do so much. You're not going to be finding four big guys to block with and doing all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot that Baker's been able to accomplish, and it sounds like that the progress has been really good.
Yeah. What else did you take away from the offensive coordinator's comments on Wednesday?
Well, I think the big news that came out of it was his comments about Odell Beckham Jr., about how he's been all in and really participating in OTAs. That was clearly a storyline that got old last year, week after week, and I think that was good to hear. And I think that puts what could have been another story to bed. And I think it's good to have him involved, because you need these guys on the same page offensively. And we knew at this point of the year, even if things were normal, Odell and Jarvis wouldn't be on the field with these guys right now. They'd be rehabbing their injuries. So this part of it is very important. And I think getting these guys as prepared as possible for maybe potentially the limited reps they're able to get in training camp, I think is huge, because we know Jarvis is recovering from a pretty serious injury. Same with Odell. Unsure on Odell's timetable to return, but you got to prepare as if you're not going to have him every single day in training camp. So maximizing these opportunities and just having an understanding of a brand new offense is huge and important for this team's future.
No question about it. I was very happy to hear about how active he's been and what a leader, Jarvis Landry is becoming of this football team before our eyes from both Joel Bitonio and Alex Van Pelt. So that's what's going on around Berea. We continue to wait and see what training camp will look like and, of course, what the 2020 NFL season will end up looking like now less than 100 days away from kickoff of the 101st season of the National Football League. Time now for our interview of the week, and it's a good one. We wanted to kind of start getting to know some of the new coaches, some of the front office personnel, maybe some guys that have been in the building for a while that just got promoted. Compliments of our new GM, Andrew Berry, like Glenn Cook, who is now the vice president of player personnel, all-around great guy. He's got a great jump shot. Gribble can attest to it. Pretty good basketball game. We delve into a number of different things with Mr. Cook. Have a watch and have a listen. And we're happy to be joined right now on the best podcast available by our new Vice President of Player Personnel. Glenn Cook joins us. My friend, congratulations on a well-deserved promotion under the new Andrew Berry regime. And the last time we saw you in person was at the NFL Combine. Clearly, it's been a few months, and there's been a lot going on. So why don't you kind of give us the Cliff Notes version of what's gone on with you here in these past few months that have been pretty crazy around the world?
Well, we had a draft. I'm not sure if you got a chance to see that. No, so I'm actually sitting in my office for the first time since about 12 weeks ago, as we just talked about. Really just trying to get reacclimated and work through this first phase. Hopefully we get everybody back in the building. But we've kind of transitioned, from picking players to now just calibrating our process and kind of getting our group caught up on any changes that we're going to make this offseason. So it's been a little bit of a nice reprieve from the chaos a few months ago and just taking a step back and cleaning up certain parts of our process.
Glenn, when you left the office back in March, did you ever think that the draft would even go the way it did with you guys all being apart? I mean, were you even thinking about that?
I tell everybody, honestly, the only difference is not being in the room. I think at least our group did a really good job, from Trex and the IT department and Brad and our football information systems group to the coaching staff, scouts, like everyone really was unflappable, came together and did exactly what was necessary to make it a pretty successful draft. So, outside of missing that interaction of fist bumping and getting excited and putting on suits, you really did not notice much difference once you got on the clock.
Just going back to that, though, how important was it to go into that situation and have kind of an organized plan? Because obviously, if it's not organized, that could probably be tough to deal with over these kind of last few months.
No, that's a good question. Andrew is extremely organized, and I think it was first of all, it was really good having him come in with a group that was familiar with him. And so everyone really was able to transition pretty quickly. We built the draft board in February, somewhat without many bumps. And then everyone, I think, across the league was fortunate to get to go to the Combine. So having all those bits of information, having been through the fall already and gotten all the scouting piece collected, I don't think, we really had to make hard decisions until we got into, and when I say hard, it was one of those where there were really deep conversations until we got to the third round pick, where it was Jacob Phillips a little bit. But otherwise, we've done so many mock draft situations and scenario planning. We're pretty on top of it.
I was going to say, I think if there was a team that was in the forefront and the team that was more than equipped to handle this, it was you guys. You mentioned the IT department, but the number of guys that had experience and were able to not miss a beat because of the technology aspect. You guys, everything seemed to flow better than advertised.
Yeah, I joked our biggest hiccup was probably the mock draft. We actually had some technical difficulties in that, but outside of that, we're fortunate to have a group that's pretty proficient in Teams and any of the other new technology that have come out, and even some of the ones who were not. Everyone was adaptable and learned pretty quickly. So yeah, it definitely worked out pretty well from that standpoint.
Now, from your guys' department, what is the biggest difference now on the schedule now, with maybe no practices happening in the facility or no spring practices for college football right now?
Yeah, just a couple of those growth opportunities together as a group to sit around, do a little bit of, like I said earlier, calibration on our process, do a bit of historical research in terms of picks and decisions that we've made, other teams have made. Again, we're still having some of those conversations. And again, we're still working through some of those transitions and some of our guidelines and whatnot. But, it's doable. Fortunately, we have Zooms and Teams and whatnot, but it's a little bit more fun and efficient when we're in the room and can really get a sense of where everyone fell on certain decisions and kind of talking through a guy who's been in the league for 3 or 4 years. So that's probably the main difference. This is a little bit more of a downtime for us, and we kind of hand it off to the coaching staff and players to hopefully make us, look good as a unit.
And then what's it been like now welcoming in a new guy like Kwesi in his role as VP of football operations, and how is he kind of meshed into the setup that you guys have going now?
Yeah, I think once you guys get to know Quays, you'll see it's probably not hard to bring him into the fold. He's extremely intelligent, tons of energy, but at the same time, he's a continuous learner, soaks up information, like a super sponge. It was really us trying to keep up with Quays, to be honest with you. He's a pretty hyped and energetic individual, so it's been pretty seamless in that regard. Quays has been fun to work with from afar, and getting him in the building is going to be even funner.
How many different scenarios are you and the crew there coming up with as it pertains to the upcoming college football season? It may happen, might not happen. You've got certain conferences that say we're just going to play a conference schedule. How many different scenarios do you have to come up with, or is it really just, more of a reactionary deal than anything else?
At the end of the day, we have to be prepared to respond to whatever decisions the NCAA or particular states make. We have, I'd say, if I gave you a hard number, probably 5 to 6 different scenarios and contingencies we're working through and pretty close to fleshing out. It's a virus that we can't control, and obviously we have to somewhat play it by ear, but we're trying to be as prepared as we can in the event that the season goes smoothly and we're able to travel as normal, or if teams create a little bit of a delay in terms of when you can come, and or maybe limitations around how many people can come. So we're trying to think through as many different possibilities as we can, and as we hear new information, we're keeping our ear to the ground in terms of the college landscape, and we'll just have to be ready to adapt as necessary.
Glenn, you mentioned earlier about Andrew knowing you guys and that really helping in the process. What did it mean to kind of see, now that the staff is together, that the vast majority of it is people who were here before, and also a lot of people now in elevated new positions, and kind of the trust that he has in the staff that's on hand?
Yeah, we talked about earning trust daily, as a senior group with Mr. Haslam and D and J-Dub and just the ownership group. And, trust is that core foundational piece to everything else you do. So from that standpoint, it was awesome to go into a situation where you trusted both the individual and the scout per se, piece of the people you work with, because then it just became a matter of, okay, how do we make the best decision? What do we need in order to make these decisions, as opposed to trying to feel out, does my new direct report even like me? Where do I sit? There are a lot of things that scouts go through in terms of turnover that is really tough that people may not consider. And when you don't have to really worry about, hey, am I going to just have a job? Everyone's focus is on building the team and making the best decisions for the Browns.
And for you personally, what is the big difference in now what you're doing as opposed to what you were doing before now?
What's not different?
What's different? What are the biggest adjustments for you in your new role, I guess?
The biggest adjustment is, just giving up some of the, the day-to-day film parts of it. I'm still working through how to make sure I get my work done in that regards. But, again, it goes back to what I just said. You just have to trust the group to guide you. And we talk about building the menu for Andrew. He's like the master chef as I review it. And so to a lesser degree, we have to trust, myself and Sags has to trust the rest of the group to help build that more day-to-day menu, that more fall type menu. So when we get to draft meetings, we're all looking and headed in the same direction.
Was there a draft pick over that draft weekend, where you just kind of gave yourself a little Tiger Woods fist pump? Like, yeah, that's the guy. We got our guy. Was there a moment like that for you personally, a player maybe that you had spent a lot of time working on or looking at?
I know it's going to seem like a cop-out, but it truly was a unified fist pump moment. I think across personnel was Jedrick. There were really good players at that position that we were targeting. But if you would have told me we could walk away with Jedrick at 10, I probably wouldn't have believed you. So to have him a little bit fall into our laps was just a little bit of a sigh of relief, to be honest with you. So that to start it off, that was a fist pump moment, to be frank.
I know you guys are pretty plugged in with what other teams are going to do, but like you said, it sounds like you're pretty surprised by that. I mean, when you're going through a draft, how much anxiety is there while you're waiting for other teams to behave, and how much do these teams make picks that you pretty much are expecting them to make?
Yeah, I don't know if I can put a percentage or quantify, the ratio of the ones and the ones you're surprised by. I'd say it's, and this would fall across the league, it's pretty consistent in terms of what positions get picked. There's probably a handful of just true, oh my gosh, I did not see that coming situations every year. But I think, the league does a pretty good job of knowing what other teams need, whether it's positionally or, trace-wise, just in terms of if teams had the same philosophy for a while. But it just, it comes down to a few options, and sometimes who you thought would be in their range ends up not, and vice versa. So I think we do a good job of probably getting that part right. The player piece is just, there's too much human error in that part of it.
Well, in that line of thinking, how fortunate was it that a guy like as accomplished as Grant becomes available for you guys at that point in the second round?
Yeah, again, we felt so good about it that, obviously we moved back, and, we hope he brings that ball hawking skill set that he's had at LSU to our team. But, he had a what some would consider a rough 2019, just battling through some injuries, but just his entire profile, his entire resume, to get a player like that, at the first part of the second round is not a bad pick.
Yeah, not too shabby at all. We will take that. You missed your guys, Bishop and Zagura, doing cartwheels the night of that.
Oh, goodness.
On that Friday night. It was a little crazy, to say the least. We're talking with Vice President of Player Personnel, Glenn Cook. And you take a look at this whole team, the draft process, you guys working apart until this week. But yet the coaches still aren't back in, and the players aren't back. But What has it been like in your limited in-person workings with Kevin Stefanski and his staff?
And Kevin is Mr. Cool. You probably won't get a ton of emotion, good or bad, out of him. He's extremely cerebral. I think he does a good job of driving the message. He's been very calculated, I've noticed, just in our team meetings, of just giving our guys thoughtful things to think about, whether it's personal, related to football, or other things, auxiliary. But he's just very, I've been really impressed with just his preparedness and calculation around how he's trying to develop the group, even being away, which is extremely tough when you have 90 players, multiple coaches, personnel, part of the other football operations downstairs, all on a Zoom call. And, he's done a really good job of just organizing that entire operations. And I've learned a lot just sitting in on those team meetings and other things.
And is it safe to say that you guys have done a pretty good job already of identifying the traits that his staff and he's looking for player-wise? Because it seems like a lot of these guys check all the boxes.
We've been extremely clear in the communication. It's easy, easier, I'll say. Let me not forget hubris there, but it's easier when you know what you're looking for. The coaches really laid it out on both sides of the ball in terms of whether it's physically, mentally, trace-wise, and it's just things that are scheme-specific. We were pretty prepared, to make decisions around that when we got to the draft. And even when you look at our free agency and any other, later signings we made, he did a really good job of just helping guide us in terms of what he needs in order to be successful.
And I guess the one type of signing and player acquisitions is identifying almost like a new position at fullback. I mean, it seems like that was made point clear right away for you guys to start.
Well, being a former linebacker, I miss and don't miss a fullback. I think it's a valuable position in this scheme, and we feel really good about bringing over Andy from Denver. That trade was something we thought through for a good amount of time, and we're able to pull through on that. But the fullback is a new position, and it's people say it's dying out, but there's still some pretty good ones out there, and it's going to help us have a really good running game. Having a guy who's athletic and able to, be versatile in this scheme, like Andy and block for what I feel like is two of the best in the league, is going to be really exciting to watch.
And Glenn, I'll just ask this. I mean, for us, we've been out of the office for a couple months. I think a lot of us are anxious to get back. How much does all of this, the promotion, the new front office, and then just the waiting period you've had, what kind of excitement level do you put on just getting toward the season and getting this going?
I mean, it gives you a greater appreciation for the game and some of the things you were able to experience day to day and never have to think about. I think we've all had a chance to sit around and think about, man, just being able to go to an 11 o'clock walkthrough or, a quick 30-minute, walkthrough session or team meeting, sitting down at lunch with, you guys and the players. I really appreciate that more. And I think we'll all show more gratitude around those opportunities just because, again, until it gets taken away, sometimes you just don't know how fragile and important those moments are. So I'm definitely excited to get people back in the building. It's a ghost town right now, but I understand protocol and making sure it's safe for our organization when we do bring people back. But I'm definitely excited to get back going.
All right. So you were at the U as a linebacker from 04 to 06, 07 with an injury, 08 you played. I've gone through and found the top 4 players I think that you might have gone up against in practice daily. Devin Hester, Greg Olsen, Travis Benjamin, Frank Gore. Who was the toughest, or am I missing one?
Well, my first year, Kellen Winslow was there.
Did not see that one. That was my fault.
Kind of that class was my first year. It was there last year. By far the toughest was Frank Gore. Hardest guy I've ever had to tackle, one of the strongest people I've ever gone up against. I think him and Maurice Jones-Drew are probably the two strongest people I've ever encountered in a football game. But yeah, by far Frank Gore's tougher than anybody. Him and Sean T. But Frank is tough as nails, as you can see with him still playing. I think that says enough.
All right, and then I have to ask one other question. You played football at Miami, but yet you got drafted by the Chicago Cubs.
I did.
Out of college. Did you play baseball at the U?
No, you want the full story or the short story?
We have all the time in the world depending on you. I'll always take it.
So I played in high school. I actually went to my high school, Chaminade Madonna. Shout out to Chaminade, which was a pretty good high school baseball team before I got there. I think we were ranked 23rd, 24th in the nation my 8th grade year. So I actually went there to play baseball. Baseball was my first sport. And I got there, always had played football, loved it. Just went out for the team. And we ended up being really, really good. John Beeson was on my team, Kerry Williams, two guys who played the NFL. We had a class of 16 or 17 guys with D1 scholarships. But I still played baseball. Kind of was in and out of it. Scouts would come in and recognize I was considered a five tools player. But I just somewhat gravitated towards football for a number of reasons, getting a scholarship offer. Went to Miami thinking I was going to be able to play both. I kind of got the, that's a part of the package. You can come here, play both sports. Of course, I go to talk to the coaching staff about going out in the spring, and it was well, if you go out for baseball, you probably want to earn a scholarship. So that killed that until I was done. And then try to cut the story down. Someone who scouted me in high school reached out to me after the draft my last year at Miami and said, hey, having a workout, looking for some, former baseball players who have athleticism and, maybe potential developmental people in the minors and want to bring you in. So go to a workout. I tell people I had an out-of-body experience because I hadn't touched the bat, hadn't thrown a ball. I was hitting homers to dead center, had a really strong arm just from being in good shape from football. And so they said, hey, we're going to draft you in the third day. We don't know when or where, but just be by your phone. And the rest is kind of history. So great experience. I went, I think 0 for 20 in my first 20 at bats. Couldn't catch up to a curveball and kind of fought my way to 200 or close to 200 by the end of it. So it was fun. It was fun.
Yeah. Not many people. Yeah, I took 4 years off, and then I got drafted by the Cubs. No big deal. Yeah. Hey, we appreciate your time. Congratulations on the promotion. Again, well-deserved, and we couldn't be happier for you. Gribble hopes that your jumper is all right and doing okay here.
Hey, I'm ready for some basketball, man. We missed that too.
I've been in some withdrawal. I haven't played in 3 months at least.
Basketball and flag. I don't know which one. Which one's more? Probably basketball.
Do you think Barry will hop back in the flag football?
I don't know. There's probably too much risk there. We can't lose Barry going down to an ACL or something. So you may have to be.
We appreciate everything. We hope you and your family continue to stay safe during this crazy time. If it's not one thing, it's another thing. And we wish you all the best of luck. And we all can't wait to be in the same building with you again soon. And here's hoping we're all playing some football and getting some Browns football in here in 2020.
Nah, likewise. I'm ready for the dog pound to cause a ruckus this fall. So hopefully we get back out there.
Thanks to Glenn Cook, the Vice President of Player Personnel, the new VP of Player Personnel for the Cleveland Browns, but a guy, Gribbs, we all have a great relationship with. I mean, he is one of the more personable people that you will see from that side of the building. And we call that side of the building the front office, the coaches. They have their own wing in the building. And sometimes those guys spend a lot of quality time behind closed doors, and you don't really see them. You don't get a chance to know them. He's one of those guys, though, that quite personable and a great guy. We couldn't be happier for him.
Yeah, I've played some hoops with him before, too. He can play some basketball also. And I think our new mission now is we got to get footage of that where that out of body experience he had, where he's just mashing home runs. Someone had to have recorded it somewhere.
There's no way that no one doesn't have a copy of that. I mean, for him again, when I saw it, and I'm doing a little homework before the interview, and it says drafted by the Cubs, and I'm like, okay, so he played baseball at Miami and he got noticed. No, he didn't play it.
Yeah.
He took 4 years off and was good enough to be drafted into pro baseball. Okay. We can all be so lucky. So,
yeah.
Other big takeaways from him, thoughts on what he had to say.
I said, I've talked to Glenn recently, and I've talked to the Kwesi, the new guy, the VP of football operations, and you just get the sense that the tone has been set by Andrew Berry in that front office, and it's a very, I wouldn't say relaxed, but it's just they feel comfortable with what they're doing, and I think they're confident in what they're doing, and I think that was made pretty clear by the way Glenn has kind of looked back on the past few months and it not really being a big deal for them. And I think you asked a good question there about the college football season. I mean, that's a big one for them. I mean, now is a time where they might have been not doing as much, but come in the fall, it'll be tricky to get around and try to get to these games, get to these practices, and get all the information that they are comfortable getting, because part of being an information-driven organization like the Browns are is you got to get the guys on the ground that get the information. I mean, that's the big part of it. So they've got a lot of scenarios to go through, but again, from the very beginning, time has been on the NFL side with all of this. So we're now at 100 days until the season gets started. So it's winding down, but still a lot can happen over these 100 days.
Yeah, a lot can happen. And, we were lucky enough this season for the draft to happen, still to happen, because a lot of the guys on the ground that will be reporting to Glenn Cook had already been in college towns and been there on weekends watching football games in person and watching tape and getting to know these guys before we were on shutdown. That process starts early. That process starts, as you mentioned, with spring ball and then with the fall. And I think if you don't have that, then I think it becomes a real big challenge to draft players that you really are blind going into, or have to rely on someone else telling you either they're good, they're bad, they're good citizens, not good citizens.
Yeah. No, it's hopefully they can we all start at the same time and we look back on all the speculation as being unnecessary. But I think that's the best case scenario, but it just seems like they're going to have to be able to adjust and adapt on the fly. We've been doing it for months now. It'll just be the next step in that direction.
How important do you think it was for Andrew Berry to keep as many guys as he did? There wasn't a lot of turnover after the draft.
No, very little, and I think that you had the turnover pretty much right away, and with when he came aboard, and otherwise though, it's a lot of people he became familiar with, and I think that there's good reasoning behind that. I think that he had that comfort level, that familiarity with them during his first time here, and I think mostly the thing that encouraged me was just how many guys he elevated. I think that's the big thing that I saw when we were putting out that information. I mean, and I don't want to say males and females. I mean, elevating them into roles that they weren't in before, but that he trusts them to execute. And I think that for a lot of new GMs, it's just easy to come in, clean house, and bring in new people. But Andrew Berry knew that there were good people in the organization and really people that believed in the way he was going to set it up. And I think that really helped in this transition.
And you mentioned it. I mean, the front office under Andrew Berry is in lockstep, and they are marching right alongside that coaching staff. And I think it's impressive to hear Cook talk about Kevin Stefanski and his staff, and Stefanski and how he's handled things and how he's leading on that side of the football operation.
Yeah, I think it's become just pretty clear they are on the same page of knowing what this staff wants, and I think that's why it just seems like all these guys fit into the way you can. It's almost easy to pick where these guys are going to go on the field when these guys end up getting on the field. So I think the communication's been great, and I think it'll help, and I think it'll result in what we believe is going to be a better team this fall.
Well, and I think that's why everybody is in we all want to see football because we have leadership from top to bottom and we have a plan in place, and it's going to be very exciting to see this all come together and hopefully into January playing some really meaningful football games. We want to thank Glenn Cook for his time. We want to thank Jeff McDaniel for all of his hard work, and of course the Browns Public Relations Department, who's been working nonstop to get us guys who are in the building, not in the building, and who are all over the place. We appreciate their efforts as well. For Andrew Gribble, I'm Jason Gibbs. Make sure you log on to clevelandbrowns.com or wherever you get your podcasts. We tell you this at the end of every podcast because we want you to log on and subscribe and like the Cleveland Browns best podcast available. That's what we want. We want you to like. We want you to subscribe. We also want you to check us out on our YouTube page, youtube.com/Browns. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We are back with you next week on the best podcast available.